Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Today's Shogun update takes us through chapter 12. I wasn't stopping to take as many notes through my last couple of listening sessions, partly because I was in a good workflow and partly just because the segments I listened to felt like just longer extensions of previous elements of the story. And you get this a lot in classics and in epics of this scope, where the writer doesn't sit down and stick to a rigid outline and address something only to the extent that it needs to be addressed and then move on. Oftentimes there's a poetic chasing of a thought or a particular question. And usually this plays out as dialogue between two different characters who are seeing the same issue through different lenses or are interrogating each other for information. This happens between Yabu and one of his subordinates, Toranaga and one of his subordinates, Rodriguez and Blackthorn, the Portuguese and English sailor. And through these discussions, you convey information to the reader, but also you can ask kind of open philosophical questions, or you can make statements that then reveal more about the character and a particular subject at hand. In this case, Rodriguez is continuing to learn from Blackthorn, as well as teach him about local customs, and Blackthorn in turn is trying to get a handle on what the lay of the land is politically and diplomatically, for lack of a better term, because ultimately that knowledge is going to be of value to him with regards to getting his ship back, and getting back to his homeland. We're also introduced to a female character whose name is sticking in my head because it's kind of funny. Her name is Maricosa. At least, it could be one of those things that, maybe it's pronounced one way, but in my head it's just sticking in a complete other way because, yes, I understand her name is Japanese, but it sounds like a funny word to me in Spanish. Do you guys remember that episode of The Office? It was one of the earlier seasons when Michael found out that Oscar was gay, and he found this out because he had used a word that you used to be able to say on television, and now it gets your house burned down. I'm not going to say it on YouTube, but this character's name sounds like that word translated directly into Spanish, Maricosa. And she speaks Portuguese. She's a Japanese woman who speaks Portuguese, and Blackthorn is assigned to her, and she's his translator, his intermediary between him and Lord Toranaga. From what I understand, because the name Toranaga was throwing me off, so I looked it up, and Toranaga is a fictional character, but he's supposed to be based on Tokugawa Ieyasu. Audible recommended another book to me. It's a nonfiction that is about Tokugawa Ieyasu, who I believe was the first shogun, the first overall leader of Japan. And so Toranaga is a fictionalized facsimile of Tokugawa, but made up so that Clavel could kind of do his own thing with him, which I'm fine with in historical fiction. But anyway, he's this big, powerful daimyo, shogun, leader, whatever, of Japan. While he's interrogating Blackthorn feels intense pressure because, again, Japan very heavily values honor in their society, and you have to be honest, you have to be truthful, and if you tell them a lie, they'll be able to find out and they'll kill the heck out of you. But during this interrogation, he may very well also reveal things about what the outside world thinks about Japan that Japan won't find flattering or will even find offensive, and that could also land him in literal hot water because they have already boiled at least one of his men to death. But during this interrogation, he tells Blackthorn, "Draw me a map of the world. Show me what you guys know about the world beyond the borders of Japan," which is a massive cluster of islands, and so they have maps of their internal boundaries and such, but Blackthorn's like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that," and he shows him Eastern Hemisphere, Western, North, South, here's what we know of the Americas, And then he starts to explain that the Catholics have laid claim to the entire world and then divided it up between the two major maritime powers, which are Portugal and Spain, the two powers on the Iberian Peninsula. And he has to very uncomfortably tell Toranaga, yeah, this empire has laid claim to all of Japan. They think it belongs to them. And he's like, oh, do they now? Because I've been letting the Portuguese come here and preach their religion to us, but not a huge fan of that. And again, that creates tension and creates conflict. I said this at the beginning, it's the kind of historical fiction that I really love because it tells a great story on its own, but it also tells you a lot about the history of the era and the worldview of the different peoples and how the nation that they came from and the religion that they espouse greatly affects how they interact with each other. There was also one particular scene as they were struggling through difficult waters, doing some sailing through a storm and stuff, where Rodriguez was shouting at Blackthorn, and there was a quote that, because I'm doing a car video right now, I don't have my phone right in front of me, where Rodriguez says, what is life except for pain? Pain is the measure of a man. It is a man's calling in life to live with pain. So basically saying, suck it up, buttercup, let's pull through this thing. This is our job as men. This is another quality that I find extremely valuable in books like this, because it can teach you things kind of in a vacuum or kind of in a stable setting that will then become applicable when you find yourself in a real life storm. In fact, it kind of gave me flashbacks to back in high school. I swear, every blue collar job that I've had, especially since getting into trucking, I found out that all of my coworkers also worked at freaking Discount Tire in high school like I did. It's like this rite of passage, this gauntlet that you had to go through. It's fast-paced, very physical work for not a whole lot of pay. I think the last time I worked there briefly in college, I might have been making $10 an hour, which was good for 2008. But anyway, you've got a whole bunch of movement going on, you got a whole bunch of safety things that you've got to be aware of, and you'll have these random moments where you're pounding out a tire on the center post machine and the bar slips and you whack your knuckles and it hurts, and the guy who's running the shop and keeping the workflow going, they call him the quarterback, who's quarterbacking, he's sitting there shouting at you. He's like, suck it up, keep going, keep the pace, that one's got all 4 tires need replaced, you got to balance them too, keep going. You can't just stop and, I hope my finger. Keep going. Suck it up. Pain is a man's burden to carry through life. I like it. I like it a lot. So yeah, I'm finished through chapter 12. So far, still enjoying it. And I'm just reminded, this is the last point here, I'm reminded again of the value of information and how empires were built on it back in those days. And just sharing this information about the world and how to navigate it with Toranaga made Blackthorn extremely valuable to him. Information is still valuable in our day, but it is collected and disseminated and sold in a different way, usually through the devices that we are constantly carrying on us. Most likely the device that you are listening to this on right now, that is constantly collecting information about you and selling it to corporations. Governments are doing everything they can to get their dirty, grimy, incestuous, pedophiliac paws on it all the time, because that information is of use to them. Usually, in the sense of from the angle of a corporation, it allows them to continue targeting you with sales for goods and services, and in the sense of a government, it allows them to maintain their political and, by a greater, stealthier extent, martial power over you. Food for thought every time you check that TOS box. What a damned world we live in. All right. That's it for now. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.